Hey everyone, it's Elise, and welcome back to another episode of Fearless Healing Mama. Today we are diving into a topic that is very personal to me, and we're going to be talking about surviving narcissistic abuse and the journey to reclaiming your power. I think that's something that a lot of survivors kind of feel there's a lot of loss when experiencing and going through the trauma and the cycles of narcissistic abuse is just a loss of self. And so this is a really big one for me. This episode is for anyone who's felt trapped or manipulated or torn down by someone they've trusted. Um, Obviously, I've been there and I know how hard it is to not just find your way out of like that fog that you kind of experience when you're in a narcissistic relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship with a partner. Um, so just trust me when I say you are so much stronger than you think you are, or you even know you are, and that you can take back your power. I think one of the biggest things that I see with a lot of women who leave or escape narcissistic relationships or abusive relationships is like how do you get past like that first time period after leaving? I think that's like a really big one. And there's so much confusion around it, I feel like. And I see it and I hear it a lot is like, I love this person so much. Why? But I know that this is an unhealthy relationship and it's very toxic and harmful to myself. And, you know, like I know I can't be with this person. So why do I miss them, or why do I wish we were back together? And I think that's kind of like a really hard thing to process, where like your heart and your brain are just like at a complete odds, where it's like, why do I feel this way? And then two, a lot of times you're dealing with that abuser or the narcissist trying to rope you back in. So I think a really important part of that survival and reclaiming your power is to understand the entire process, um, and understanding narcissistic abuse. Um, so I'm just going to read something, and it's kind of like a long story short type thing. Narcissistic abuse is a form of emotional and psychological manipulation carried out by someone with narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. So this is an actual like psychological diagnosis. People like this tend to be controlling, self-centered, and lack empathy, which often leaves those in their orbit, within their circle, feeling confused, diminished, and even doubting their own reality. So usually that experience is for people who are closely involved with this person. Sometimes it can be family members, but usually that side of them is most seen by the person they're in a relationship with. I know with my first ex-husband, who is hands down a narcissist, um, he has family members that are aware, like, oh, he's just so whatever. And then those who are close to me, while we were in a relationship, who saw those tendencies or behaviors, or the screenshots. So it really is kind of one of those things where it's like that part of them is more closely seen by people they're usually in a relationship with. And again, family members and friends can sometimes see those. friends, whatever. Anyway, so I feel like I experienced this very firsthand, obviously, with my first husband. Just like that very insidious side of narcissistic abuse, because it starts very subtly. And I know I've talked about it before, but I feel like it wasn't so subtle in the beginning as I look back. But again, I was very naive, and being close to a narcissistic person was very familiar to me. And so it didn't feel as red flaggy as it should have, probably, but I had been basically conditioned to think that this was normal. So I remember in the beginning, there was so much gaslighting and like questioning literally everything you know and everything about yourself. There was like so much erosion to my self-worth in the beginning. And like, that's crazy. Again, I feel crazy looking back at it. Like, wow, that's crazy. It's really crazy. But it just erodes your self-worth. And then the longer you stay in that environment, the more you start to internalize their toxic behavior as if it's your fault. And sometimes they will even flat out say, like, my behavior is your fault. You triggered this. You made me be this monster. And like, if you just acted right, then you wouldn't get this side to me, you know? And another thing with narcissists that I feel like it's kind of hard to envelope is like, they're very charming and everybody loves them. And like, I saw it with my dad and I saw it with my first husband and I've seen it with a lot of people. I feel like now people who like everyone gravitates towards, I kind of like side eye them a little bit because I'm very hypersensitive to those type of personalities. And again, that's something that like is kind of a part of my journey process, whatever, is that, you know, like that hyper awareness now where I am now. But two, one of the big things for me was listening to my intuition more and trusting myself more. And so I am extremely intuitive. And a lot of times I will get senses or feelings, and I've talked to my mom about this because she's very much the same way. But I'll just have a feeling. And there's different feelings I get around different people, whether it's like you are just not a good person, or there's something grimy about you. Or even like, this is going to sound so bad, but I'm sometimes very frequently meet people where I'm like, you're a cheater. You are not. And it's not even like I've had an extensive conversation or anything. Like, I'll meet somebody, like shake their hand, be like, immediately I just have this sense. So it's just, my intuition is very hyper intuitive. And that went all out the window when I was in a relationship with my first husband. And so part of my healing process was starting to learn to listen to that. And it's not just like that kind of stuff with people, but there's different things I can pick up on. So I really feel like one of the hardest things with being in a relationship with a narcissist is realizing what is actually happening. And I think that's like a key part of the cycle, is that they keep you in like this constant state of confusion where you're like, I don't know which way is up. I don't know what's going on. What is real? Like, I feel like they start that part of the cycle very quickly because that's how they gain their control. And so there's a lot of gaslighting. they make you question your memory or perception of reality, where you're like, did I actually, maybe I am just confused. And so anytime I catch myself doing that around people, I become very, like, my antennas go up, because I'm like, it's a pet peeve of mine. I don't like it when people make me feel like I'm crazy, because I spent so long, such a long part of my life feeling that way. And then looking back and being like, I wasn't crazy. Like, it's pretty wild. But yeah, just like that constant questioning of your reality is like a huge thing. And then a big part of that, like another side to that, I guess I would say, is, well, you're just being too sensitive. Or imagining things, like you're reading too deep into it, or you're being too sensitive about it. And especially when you confront them about certain behaviors. So there's a couple things that are like kind of more of the obvious, like, staple signs of a narcissist. There's gaslighting, love bombing, where they just like shower with you with so much attention and affection, and make you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm the only girl in the world, and then snatching it all away, and like it could even be ghosting you and then coming back with some bullshit, whatever, and then breadcrumbing, and then love bombing, and then breadcrumbing. It's like this very chaotic cycle with the love bombing. Triangulation, using others to create insecurity or competition in your relationship. And that happened a lot. Because he was so charismatic and charming. He had a lot of girls that were always talking to him and whatever. And and he would entertain it. And it would make me, it was almost like this, like, well, you just need to like do better at like keeping my interest or whatever, if you want me to stick around. So he did a lot of triangulation in the beginning. And then, I think at one point his cousin even was like part of like a triangulation phase he had going. It was pretty wild. Like, she hated my guts. It was hella weird energy. But anyway, like inviting his ex-girlfriend that she liked more than me to family functions while I was like at work and stuff, or like telling him to not invite me to certain functions, and then inviting his ex-girlfriend to it, whom he had cheated on me with. Like, just the stories. Anyway, triangulation looks like a bunch of different things, but it's basically where they like use other people to make you feel insecure in the relationship, I feel like. And then a lot of blame shifting. That was a huge one for me. I know that some use it less than others and whatever, but blame shifting is a big one, I feel like, very common, where basically it's, you talk to them about one thing and then somehow you end the conversation where it's like, well, actually, it's your fault. And then manipulation. Manipulation is such a huge one. That's like an ongoing thing. Like, I don't think that ever freaking stops. Like, that just runs throughout the entire thing. There's no phases to it. It's just from beginning to end manipulation. Twisting situations to make themselves the victim and you're the perpetrator. My favorite right now is that, like, my daughter's dad, my first husband, he went to prison last May, and our custody order was updated to say that he has no access to the children, and understandably so, I feel. And he had gotten out into a halfway house and immediately had tried, well, he contacted me, and then he reached out to our oldest daughter. Probably would have reached out to our youngest, my middle, if she had access to a phone or social media like that. But his story now is like, I'm keeping his kids from him and whatever, which is crazy because he's been out since July and I haven't gotten any child support. I think I got 1 or 2 months when he first got out in a halfway house, but that's because he was working. And he's been out since July. It's October now, and no child support, which means he's either getting paid under the table. He's on probation, so he's supposed to have a job, as far as I understand. He's supposed to have a job, so either he's getting paid under the table or he's working for himself and not reporting income, whatever. Anyway, we're going on almost 18 months of no child support and no contact, which that part has been great for me. It's been hard for the kids, and I understand that part of it for them. But on the other hand, I really don't feel like they have been, like, this is the healthiest mentally and emotionally and honestly physically that they have ever been. So that part has been good. But anyway, manipulation is a big one. Just they're always the victim. All these things happen to them and it's just not fair. And usually the person they're in the relationship with is a perpetrator, the one ruining their life and whatever. So in my case, it took many, many years of reflection and healing to like fully see the patterns and understand the depth of what I had been through, to kind of like start to unpackage it and be like, oh, wow, you know, that 8-9 years that we were together, this cycle of this affected me this way. And this is why this is one of my triggers. Like, I'm a very psychological person about unpacking my trauma and everything. So like it helps me to understand like my triggers better and whatever, and learn how to change those behaviors. So anyway, that's for another episode. But it has taken me several years to fully understand his patterns and like, oh, okay, we're in this phase of your cycle now. And like, oh, this is what we're doing now. Okay. And I just shift, especially since prior to him going to prison, we had to co-parent, or I say parallel parent. So anyway, I feel like there are some pretty key steps to recovery, I guess, if that's what you want to say. Because, you know, there's that breaking free, the escaping, the surviving part. But then there's that after part, the recovery part. And so obviously the biggest, most important step is the breaking free, getting off the fucking merry-go-round. Get off, get out. But the journey to recovery is different for everyone. And these were some things that helped me. And I would like to think would help you too. Especially if you're kind of in that phase where either you are realizing that you need to leave, or you are about to leave, you're trying to leave, you just left, and you're kind of in that phase where you're like lost. Or maybe you've been free, but like you're just like, I don't know how to like put myself back together. So my spirituality was a really key part after my second divorce. And I feel really sad that after my first divorce that I did not seek out God. I think that it's not that I've ever been at a point where I'm like, oh, I hate God, or I don't believe in God, or anything like that. But it was really just, I feel like after my first divorce, it was just so in the trenches of surviving and like I just need to stay alive. I really feel like that was that chapter. Like, I just need to stay alive and like survive. And that journey was really just kind of unpacking the trauma. I don't feel like I fully healed. I think it was more like, this might have been a part of where things went wrong, and I probably could have saw those things better. So learning to, like, teaching myself to recognize red flags a little bit better, which obviously didn't work out that great. But it's a process. So after my second divorce and really like fully unpacking my shit and being like, all right, let's unload these suitcases and figure out what the hell is going on here. I feel like there's really 4 big parts to it. The first was rebuilding my self-esteem. I felt very lost, and I knew I was struggling with this prior to my second divorce, but like, I was very, very lost. I didn't know who I was. Like, I could tell you like the things that I do or I enjoy, but like, I didn't know who I am as a person outside of a mom and a wife. Like, I didn't actually know who Elise is. And it was, I mean, that's kind of crazy to say as a almost mid-30s woman that I didn't know who I was. But like, I had been so wrapped up in these relationships that I had never, I guess, honestly, feel like fully matured as an individual. And I'm sure a lot of moms, just moms in general, understand what I'm talking about. Like, but my identity was just so not my own. And so part of my healing journey was rebuilding my self-esteem. And especially after being in abusive relationships, let alone narcissistic abuse relationships, like that narcissistic relationship, abusive relationship, they just wear you down. Like, you are not your own person. It's not even like they make you feel bad about yourself. Like, you are not even your own person. And so it's just kind of one of those things where it's like reclaiming your self-identity. And then also kind of untangling that web of who they tried to say you are or were. And getting rid of like that distorted view of yourself. And so I feel like it's really critical to reconnect with who you truly are. And for me, a big part of that was spending a lot of alone time and like trying new things. And I learned that I actually really like to be alone. I always was like scared of being by myself. And like, I'm more of an introvert. So I knew that I liked my alone time, like my personal space. I needed that to recharge. But it was like, I didn't really like to go out and do things by myself. And I realized in this journey of reclaiming my self-esteem and my self-identity that I like to do things by myself and I like to be by myself. And so another part of that was journaling, which I journaled so much. Like, I have a whole box of journals from when I was younger, like all the way through high school, a little bit into college. So like literally from like I was like 8 or 9, I think, journals all the way into college. And so one of the big things for me was that I started journaling again. And that's kind of like a therapy in itself, but it also kind of helps you like get your mind right and like talk yourself through a lot of things too. And then like listing out things that I like about myself, you know, Like I'm really very smart, you know, and I think that was one of the things getting out of a narcissistic relationship where it was like I question a lot of things about myself. Um so I think journaling was really helpful in that too. Um to kind of like self affirmation myself. Is that double? Yeah. Self affirmations. Um And then another thing was setting very clear boundaries and standing firmly on them. And that can be really hard with narcissistic individuals because they hate boundaries and they want to make you miserable for having boundaries. And excuse me, that was like my stomach though. Narcissists will push boundaries to maintain control. No boundaries is what they want because it means that they have control. And so learning to say no and set clear limits, which is, it can be really hard, especially if you've gone for several years with being conditioned to put their needs first or ignoring your desires and needs and not having boundaries or being flimsy or negotiable boundaries. Like those aren't boundaries, you know? So reclaiming part of that, you know, your power back is setting boundaries. That's a huge part of reclaiming your self identity and your power and everything. So I think that's boundaries is huge. It's huge. And part of this process with, especially with a narcissist and especially co-parenting with a narcissist, is those boundaries. But then part of the communication with that is I have found, well, communication in general with a narcissist is gray rocking. So a lot of times I'll set a boundary or say no, that this isn't happening, or no, this is, you know, not, this is what we're doing, and you know, instead, or this is the process for this, or like whatever. And there'll a lot of times be little tantrums or verbal abuse or things like that when you set those boundaries. I will gray rock so damn hard. I consider it a superpower because he will be in my text messages, message, 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 message. Nothing from me, not a single peep. And he will do everything he can think of to trigger a response from me. And I kind of have to like speak my responses out loud because I'm like, you have lost your ever loving mind. Because what the fuck are you actually talking about right now? You know, get that out so that I don't reply to him. Because let's be honest, sometimes they know how to trigger you. And so gray rocking is a really key part to not just setting boundaries or keeping your boundaries for me. It's also a key part of, if you are co-parenting with a narcissist, gray rocking is fabulous. The only time I'll ever respond to anything is, you know, when it's something about the kids. And even then, if it's like something kind of outrageous, like you need to wash their clothes, I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to say nothing. Nothing at all. Another really important part to the healing journey, the recovery part, the getting better part, just like when you're sick, you go to the doctor. When you go through something traumatizing, you better take your butt to therapy. And I'll say this multiple times, probably throughout multiple episodes, is that you have got to find the right therapist for you. So don't feel frustrated. I'll usually give them a couple chances just to kind of figure out what their method is and how I feel, if it's beneficial, whatever. But a therapist who specializes in trauma and narcissistic abuse is invaluable, because a lot of therapists do not have enough experience with narcissistic abuse and that trauma to be able to fully help you. And sometimes it can even be harmful. I had a therapist that was recommended to me towards the end of my first marriage. And initially I went for myself. And then he was like, okay, well, hey, maybe we should do some couples therapy and then see if he would be open to individual therapy and whatever. So we did that whole bit towards the end. And he was not familiar with narcissistic abuse enough. And a matter of fact, I feel like it was more harmful and more traumatizing to have gone to this therapist because of his lack of experience. And so that in itself was an experience to kind of move past, because that was it was so incredibly hurtful and harmful and re-traumatizing during that time. But it's okay to date your therapist and date around and find one that works for you. But having a therapist will help you really just kind of untangle that web of emotions and irregularity and help guide you towards like regaining that sense of normalcy. Like, what is normal? What's healthy? And sometimes, honestly, all you need is somebody to tell you, no, what you're experiencing is totally normal. It's totally okay. Here, let me help you go through the steps of like processing this. Because sometimes I would gaslight myself and be like, I'm crazy. Like I've literally lost my mind. And sometimes it really just helps to have somebody who just is there for you. And then this one is kind of more difficult, and I feel like this really is only relevant to people who do not have any remaining connections with their abuser or the narcissist. But the no contact is so key. Blocked, 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 no reply, no reply. I remember recently in one of the mom groups I'm in, she had posted about how she doesn't want to get back with her baby daddy, who's a narcissist, and she's really confused, like, why he thinks it's okay to, like, keep reaching out to her, and how he flip-flops from, like, being incredibly verbally and mentally and emotionally abusive one minute, and then saying that, like, he wants to get back with her, and she's tired of him being in her phone. And from personal experience, if you go no contact, or in my case, gray rock them, they will get tired of talking to themselves. I promise you they will. And if you are selective, they will eventually get the clue. Especially in her case, it was where she was having to co-parent or parallel parent with the narcissist, or her abuser. The way she's describing it really sounded like she was still interacting with this person. And so no contact or gray rocking is an incredibly important tool to use. And once I remember the first time I heard about it, I was like, what is this about? Let me educate myself on this one, because this sounds like it might actually be helpful. And especially because at that time I was like, I ain't got nothing. I don't know what the heck to do. I'm so lost. Like, this is so frustrating and overwhelming and whatever. I love it. Love it. But yeah, it's literally just like that short answer or no answer. 'Cause girl, no answer is an answer. For real. And especially in those moments where they are on what I call a tangent or having a tantrum, where they are just popping off, and I don't answer the phone. I really don't. I don't ever answer phone calls unless it is an absolute emergency, whatever. Or make a phone call. But I think learning how to gray rock and really just be selective. I don't even like, there's different tactics with gray rocking where it's like, oh, that's your, that's your reality of it, or, I do not accept your version. I don't even reply. Nothing. You ain't getting nothing from me. So anyway, I feel like that's a really big part of reclaiming your power, and just like you are not getting anything else from me. You don't deserve anything else from me. You're not getting this part of me. You're not getting a reaction. I'm like, we're done here. You don't have control over me. And I think of like reacting to a trigger for myself is basically like, and especially with a narcissist, because they feed off of that. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative energy from you. They're an energy vampire, and they want to suck it out of you. So in my mind, the way I think of it is, if they are an energy vampire and that's what they want from me and they need it to stay alive, and they're doing everything they can to trigger me or get a reaction or response out of me, and I pop off every single time, that is keeping the monster alive. That is gasoline on the fire, all the whatever. I'm adding to it. And so a big thing for me is, you do not have that control over me anymore. You don't get any amount of energy from me. Nothing. So I feel like gray rocking is an important, I'm going to call it a tool to use when it comes to reclaiming your power. And also recovery, honestly. But I feel like reclaiming your power after narcissistic abuse is about more than just moving on, like that revenge, I'm so much better without you. It's so much more than that. It's about rediscovering who you are outside of their influence, because depending on what level you've experienced it at, I probably would have said I was very basic before, and like not a very interesting person because they were so interesting, and like, I was just lucky to be with them and along for the ride and whatever. And so, it was a long process of realizing that my worth, first of all, wasn't attached to their approval or anybody else's approval, but then also doing things that made me happy, things that I like, enjoying things that light up my life and get, are spots of sunshine in my life or joy. And it could be taking up hobbies, focusing on my children. I'm sure I'm not the only one to say this or who could say this, but I became 1,000% better mom to my kids after I got out of that relationship, both times. But especially to my 2 older children. And it was so far beyond the fact that I was very depressed and sad and just dying on the inside. It was so far beyond. I went from a sad mommy to a happy mommy. It was, my kids got the very best version of me after that, because they are such energy vampires. Like, so much of me was put into them and not myself and my kids. So focusing on my children was like a really huge part. And it makes me feel sad saying that way, but like, focusing on my kids was really important to me. And then reconnecting with friends and family. I reached out to friends that, I knew were not going to judge me, and that I had missed their friendship over the years of being isolated and having them pushed away, there was so many like friendships or relationships where he was like, I don't like them, and would make me feel really uncomfortable spending time with them, or even telling him that I had talked to them, like just very, very isolated. And like, you just need to be home with me all the time. I'm the only one who understands you type things, especially with my first husband. My second husband, it was more you can go out with your friends, but I'm going to whine and complain and make you mentally and emotionally pay for spending time with people you love and care about. But anyway, so another really empowering part to my journey, and I know I've said this before, but speaking about my experiences and sharing my story and making sure that everyone around me, as women around me, knew that I was a safe space, and that I would always support women leaving abusive relationships, or even just the divorce process in general. I'm like a semi-pro by now, but anyway, no, so I just really sharing and talking about and being very verbal and open has been very empowering for me and kind of healing. You know, being that person that I wish I had had during that process, and you know, have all different phases, whether actively in the relationship, escaping the relationship, or after, has been really empowering and healing and kind of liberating too, you know. Kind of like that realization that like I'm no longer a victim, I am a survivor, and I have a voice. Like, I have a voice, and it is my voice, nobody else's but my own. So there's a lot of different resources that I think are really important, because a lot of women, especially in more extreme cases, just don't even know how to even start. Obviously, there's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and I'm gonna say the phone number along with the crisis text line. But the National Domestic Violence Hotline phone number is 1-800-799-7233. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233. And the crisis text line, you'll text HOME, HOME, to 741741. It's free, and it's 24/7 crisis support. Okay. So I always like to put that out there, because you just, it's out there. Okay. You have it, use it. I actually used I can't remember the name of it, and I'll have to link it, but on the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or National Domestic Violence website, excuse me, they have like a safety plan checklist, and that actually helped me in my process of leaving my first marriage with my narcissistic abusive husband. And I actually used that to help myself plan how, like, I don't even know where to start. You know, I like, obviously it was basic things. Like, I know I need to get a job, and I need to get a license. I needed to get, you know, these things sorted out, but what then, you know? So I used their website a lot when I left my first marriage. But there's a lot of really good books out there too. The Narcissist Playbook by Dana Morningstar. It's a pretty good one. The Body Keeps Score. This has actually been a hot book that a lot of people have been talking about, but it is so real. So real. It's by Bessel van der Kolk, Bessel van der Kolk. And again, I'm going to link all of this stuff that I'm talking about. I'm going to link it in the information and as well as on my social media. And then Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. And that's another hot pick. But those are some really good books. I want to talk about this in one of my other episodes, or I think I did. I don't know. But there's a lot of different books about the generational trauma, or even trauma in general when leaving a narcissistic relationship. But I'm trying to space these out for you all. So again, I'm going to link everything, but, I just feel like there's so much power in educating yourself and finding a community. There's most cities or towns have a local women's shelter, or domestic abuse center. And they usually have either free therapy, counseling, support groups. At the very least, support groups is pretty common, I feel, at like all women's shelters or domestic violence centers, because they understand that the support is so important and key to your healing and recovery. And then there's a lot of online forums or even Facebook groups. I'm not going to say the name of it. I'll probably end up tagging it, but there's one that I joined that was kind of like an open forum, but I have been like a silent participator for the most part. Just like I'll see a post and it resonates with me, so I'll go through the comments and read, or I'll see a post where it's like an offer of support or information or whatever. So I really like online forums or Facebook groups like that because we're always on our phones these days, so why not, in the midst of your doom scrolling, that maybe the algorithm throws some things out at you from that. But there really is just so much power in educating yourself and finding community, whether it's with family and friends and reconnecting with them in your healing journey. I was really, really blessed. I had a few really close friends, through both divorces and relationships, that I knew no matter what, like just absolute ride or die, no judgment, and had seen everything that I had gone through, or a huge part of what I had gone through. And in the survival part, the recovery part, who just really kind of just stood by me and supported me and would let me cry anytime I needed to cry, vent anytime I needed to vent, and give advice whenever I needed advice. And my mom was a huge part of it. She actually was going to a domestic violence center in her town, in her city, and would like share a lot of the things that she was learning. And so it was kind of crazy, even though she had been out of her marriage and going through divorce from my stepdad around the time that I was going through my awakening, separation, and divorce. We kind of healed together, and some people might say it was trauma bonding, but fuck it, we were healing together from the trauma that we had gone through. Her from my dad and me from my dad or stepdad. But just community was a huge thing for me. And just like that feeling of I'm not alone, because you are not alone in your healing journey, and you don't have to figure it out by yourself. You don't have to do any of this by yourself. There are so many different types of communities. There's so many different types of support. There's all kinds of different, like I said, everybody heals, recovers, grows from these experiences and trauma and abusive relationships, everybody goes through their own process. Mine is not going to look the same as yours. I can give you advice and support and talk about whatever based off of my personal experience and general experiences and things like that, but it's not going to look the same. It's really not. So having community that supports you and reaching out is so important, especially because I feel like a lot of times you are made to feel isolated, like nobody cares about you, and so self-worth saying, I am important and I matter and I'm not alone. And so just reaching out like really is just kind of a big part of that healing journey. So anyway, I'm going to tag all of those resources I mentioned and books and groups and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to tag that. And one of the things I like about the National Domestic Violence website is that they are a huge epicenter of resources. So you can literally go on there and click, and you have the ability to get directed to local resources like in your town or your city. And then two, they even have a thing, I think it's on the website, where it's like you can do like private browsing, so it won't show up on your browser history and stuff. Like they're very conscientious about your safety. So depending on what level of abuse or whatever you're at or you're in, they try to be very accommodating. So anyway, I'm going to tag all of that information on my social media and on the podcast episode information. But that pretty much wraps up today's episode about surviving narcissistic abuse and reclaiming your power. I just really hope it resonates with you. And if it doesn't, I'm very happy for you. I really am. But I feel like I just want some part to have resonated or helped somebody. Whether you're in the midst of the struggle, you're like knee deep in it, and working your way, or you're working your way through the healing process. I think a really important part to this is like, this takes time. You are not going to snap your fingers or do one part or one step or read this book or whatever and you're all better. It's just not how it works. And so just being really patient with yourself while you work through that, and remember to take small steps, even if you have to baby step through it. But just that freedom and self-love is at the end of that tunnel and plastered throughout the process of this journey. And you're going to have so many moments where you're like, this is what it's like. This is what I've been missing. I can't believe it. This is amazing. Like, this is unreal. I am such a badass. I am so strong, and all these things I never thought I was going to survive and like was going to be so hard to deal with. Like, I've been through that like 5 times and like been there and done that. And all those days that I thought I wasn't going to make it, I made it. And like, I am strong. You are strong, and you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. Like, you're not alone in this process, and you deserve a life free from abuse and misery. Like, you deserve to be fucking happy. In case anybody hasn't told you lately, you deserve to be happy. And yeah, like, you deserve it all. You're stronger than you think you are, and you deserve to be happy, healthy, and filled with love. So thank you for listening. I hope you'll join me next week when we dive into another really important topic. My episode, Self-Care is Not Selfish. This is one of my favorite things. I've never really been into self-care until like probably the last 2 years, really. Well, I guess, yeah, it has been like 3 years, almost 3 years. But self-care is not selfish. Prioritizing your well-being is super important. And so that's going to be in next week's episode. Until then, keep healing, keep thriving, and remember you're not alone. Bye.